For years, German fighter pilots believed speed and agility won air battles, a 3-ton Bf-109 outpacing any threat. But in 1943, those calculations shattered. A new American machine thundered into the skies, 7 tons of brute force the size of a bomber, and armed with 8.50 caliber guns, the P-47 Thunderbolt. German debriefings reveal a chilling truth. Pilots who once mocked heavy fighters now face something they couldn't outclimb, outdive, or silence. This is the shocking reality behind the P-47 Thunderbolt. How immense scale and raw power rewrote the rules of air combat and triggered a crisis inside the Luftwaffe. But what exactly made Germany's best-trained aces lose faith in everything they'd been taught? In the first months of 1943, German fighter squadrons held a reputation forged by years of tactical success. Luftwaffe pilots flying the Messerschmitt Bf-119 believed their machines represented the pinnacle of aerial combat. Agile, quick to climb, and engineered for the kind of dogfights that had delivered victory after victory. The Bf-109G, weighing just over 3 tons fully loaded, could reach the combat altitude of 20,000 feet in under 8 minutes. Its compact design and high power-to-weight ratio allowed it to outturn and outclimb most adversaries. In training halls across Germany, instructors drilled the same message: lighter is deadlier. Maneuverability, not brute force, wins the day. This doctrine was not just theory, it was reflected in the air war's numbers. Through the winter and spring, German pilots routinely intercepted Allied bombers over Western Europe, often claiming double or triple the actual number of aircraft destroyed. Bomber formations without long-range escort suffered staggering losses. In January, the 8th Air Force sent out 6 bombing groups. By June, that number had only risen to 13. The Luftwaffe's fighter arm, at its peak efficiency, capitalized on these limited numbers. Loss rates for American bombers hovered around 6.6% per mission, with damage rates exceeding 35%. German pilots, many with hundreds of operational hours, returned from sorties with stories of outmaneuvering slower, heavier American types. The prevailing attitude was summed up by a veteran of JG-26. The heavier the enemy fighter, the easier the kill. Tacticians in Berlin reinforced this confidence. Official briefings compared the 3-ton Bf-109's climb and turn rates to the heavier RAF Spitfire and the new American arrivals. The message was clear. German engineering had solved the riddle of air combat. The Bf-109's light frame, paired with its Daimler-Benz engine, provided the edge needed to dictate the terms of every engagement. Fighter doctrine emphasized energy tactics, using altitude and speed to strike and then disengage, always exploiting the aircraft's nimbleness. Pilots were taught to avoid drawn-out turning battles with the Spitfire, but to dominate in vertical maneuvers, where the Bf-109's acceleration and climb shone. In operational debriefs, squadron leaders cited mission success rates as evidence of their technical superiority. In March, Luftwaffe groups defending the West could claim over 50% of intercepted bombers damaged or destroyed in a single week. Losses among German fighters were significant, but replacement pilots still entered combat, believing in the invincibility of their doctrine. The belief that weight was the enemy of victory ran deep. An ace from JG2 put it plainly: no heavy fighter can match a true Jagdflugzeug in the climb or the turn. They are targets, not hunters. This mindset shaped every aspect of Luftwaffe planning. When American squadrons began to introduce new models, German intelligence dismissed early reports of a large radial-engined fighter as irrelevant. Heavy fighters, the thinking went, would always be too slow, too clumsy, too vulnerable. The expectation was that any new American design would fall to the same tactics that had worked for years. Instructors reminded pilots that the laws of physics and German engineering were on their side. As spring became summer, the Western Air War intensified. The Luftwaffe's best-trained pilots, many with dozens of victories, continued to rely on the formula that had brought them this far: lightweight speed, disciplined formation, and the certainty that no enemy could outclimb or outmaneuver a German fighter. The confidence was absolute. What no one expected was that the next American arrival would not play by the old rules. German fighter schools drilled a single truth into every new pilot: lighter is deadlier. Training manuals filled with energy fighting diagrams and carefully drawn turn circles hammered home the relationship between mass and maneuver. Instructors warned that any excess weight, armor, extra fuel, heavy guns meant lost altitude, sluggish acceleration, and a death sentence in a turning fight. The Bf-109's 3-ton frame was held up as the ideal, its power-to-weight ratio a constant reference in classroom lectures. Charts compared the climb rates of German interceptors to heavier Allied types, reinforcing the belief that nimbleness, not brute force, delivered victory. Inside briefing rooms, instructors used chalk to sketch the equations. More mass equals more inertia equals slower response. Pilots learned to visualize energy as altitude and speed, both easily lost if the aircraft became too heavy. The doctrine was explicit: avoid prolonged turning battles with the Spitfire, but expect to dominate any heavier adversary in the vertical. Instructors read aloud from technical bulletins: no Jagdflugzeug exceeding 3,500 kilograms can sustain the climb or turn rates required for offensive action. The message was clear: weight meant vulnerability. Heavy fighters were targets, not hunters. Tactical theory bled into every aspect of operational planning. Formation leaders reminded their squadrons that the laws of physics favored the nimble. German intelligence officers, reviewing captured Allied manuals, dismissed reports of new, larger American fighters as irrelevant. The prevailing wisdom, repeated in debriefs and tactical updates, was that any new American design would be slow to climb, quick to stall, and easy to outmaneuver. Training films showed Bf-109s circling heavier opponents, closing for the kill as the enemy bled energy in every turn. This belief was not just dogma, it was a comfort. Veteran pilots, many with hundreds of sorties, returned from missions convinced that agility and discipline would always win the day. When rumors spread of a new radial-engined American fighter, the reaction was predictable. Instructors reassured the next class of cadets: the Americans build big machines, but they cannot outfly you. Trust your training. The Luftwaffe's entire tactical framework rested on this assumption. The Bf-109's climb rate, its ability to gain altitude in minutes, was seen as unassailable proof of German engineering's superiority. Even as Allied bombers began to appear in greater numbers, the doctrine held firm. Lightness meant control, weight meant defeat. No one in those lecture halls imagined a scenario where mass could become an advantage, or that the next American arrival would force them to question everything they'd learned. April 15, 1943, a new silhouette crosses the channel, bigger, heavier, and louder than anything the Luftwaffe has faced before. The P-47 Thunderbolt, weighing in at over 7 tons fully loaded, enters the European air war. Its Pratt & Whitney R2800 engine, a 2,000 horsepower double-row radial, fills the sky with a deep mechanical roar. German spotters, trained to judge threats by size and shape, struggle to fit this machine into any known category. At first glance, it looks like a mistake, too large, too blunt, too heavy for a dogfight. But within weeks, Luftwaffe pilots start reporting a new kind of encounter. Heavy American fighters dropping from altitude, accelerating past 500 miles per hour in a near vertical dive. The physics are simple, but the effect is devastating. Mass equals momentum. In a dive, the Thunderbolt's weight becomes a weapon. Terminal velocity tests at Republic Aviation show the P-47 can safely exceed 500 miles per hour, sometimes more, without structural failure. German pilots, accustomed to using their Bf-109s climb and turn to dictate the fight, find the tables reversed. The Bf-109, just over 3 tons, can't follow. Its controls stiffen. At 400 miles per hour, a pilot is fighting the stick just to keep the wings level. The Thunderbolt, by contrast, stays stable, its thick wings and rugged frame shrugging off the compressibility effects that send lighter fighters tumbling. The R2800's turbo supercharger, a maze of ducting and cast alloy, keeps power high even as the air thins. At 25,000 feet, most German engines are gasping. The Thunderbolt's engine still delivers. American pilots learn quickly, gain altitude, dive with the sun, and use gravity to turn the aircraft's bulk into pure speed. In these moments, the P-47 isn't just keeping up, it's untouchable. Luftwaffe pilots, trained to expect that weight is always a weakness, now face a machine that turns mass into escape velocity. The first confirmed kills come as a shock. Reports from JG-26 describe Thunderbolts diving through formation, firing, and then disappearing in a blur before any German fighter can react. Aces accustomed to dictating the fight now find themselves outpaced, unable to catch the American giants before they climb away. One captured pilot, interrogated in June 1943, sums up the confusion. "We saw them coming down like meteors. We tried to follow, but our machines shook apart. They were gone before we could even aim." The engineering philosophy behind the Thunderbolt isn't subtle. Alexander Kartveli, the lead designer, believed that brute force could win a dogfight as surely as finesse. He built an airframe that could survive terminal dives, absorb punishment, and turn gravity into an offensive tool. The result is a fighter that breaks the rules German pilots have drilled since flight school. In the hands of an experienced pilot, the P-47's mass isn't a liability, it's a shield and a sword. By midsummer, the Luftwaffe's confidence in lightweight doctrine is already eroding. Tactical bulletins warn pilots, do not attempt to follow Thunderbolts in a dive. Stay high, avoid vertical pursuits, and watch for the sudden, high-speed attack. But the damage is done. The physics of mass and momentum, once dismissed as irrelevant to fighter combat, have become the Americans' most reliable ally. The sky over Western Europe is no longer a contest of nimbleness alone. Now, it's a contest of power, altitude, and the terrifying certainty that the heaviest fighter in the war can also be the fastest when it matters most. 8.50 caliber machine guns line each wing of the P-47 Thunderbolt. Each gun feeds from a belt, 425 rounds per gun, for a total of 3,400 rounds, more than triple the ammunition carried by a Bf-109. This is not a subtle weapon. When a Thunderbolt rolls in behind a German fighter, the sky fills with a solid wall of tracers. Gun camera footage from spring 1944 shows streams of fire converging on Luftwaffe tails, tearing control surfaces and engine cowlings apart in seconds. German pilots, trained to expect short, precise bursts from adversaries, instead face a torrent. One Luftwaffe veteran described the experience. It was like flying into a hailstorm. You could not escape the fire. The psychological effect is immediate. No amount of maneuvering feels safe. The Bf 109, with its single 20mm cannon and 2 machine guns, can't answer in kind. Ammunition runs out in seconds. The Thunderbolt, by contrast, keeps firing long bursts, no hesitation, until the target breaks apart or disappears in a cloud of smoke. Survivability is the second shock. The P-47's armor plate wraps around the cockpit and engine. Self-sealing fuel tanks line the belly. Structural spars are overbuilt, the skin thick and riveted. In one documented sortie, Robert S. Johnson's Thunderbolt returned to England with over 100 bullet holes, a shattered canopy, and a cylinder blown clear off the engine. Johnson stayed in the fight, outpacing his pursuer, the controls still responsive. The German pilot behind him emptied his guns, circled in disbelief, and then peeled away. Johnson lived. The Thunderbolt landed safely. Stories like this spread quickly through Luftwaffe squadrons. Debriefings begin to include warnings. Avoid head-on passes with Thunderbolts, never follow one into a dive, and do not assume a damaged P-47 is out of the fight. Aces accustomed to quick kills now need multiple passes, sometimes with no effect. One after-action report from JG-27 describes a P-47 absorbing 21 20mm cannon hits and returning to base. The term flying tank enters the German vocabulary. The futility sinks in. Gun camera films show Bf 109 scoring perfect hits, only to watch Thunderbolts keep climbing, smoke trailing, but engines still running. Pilots begin to avoid Thunderbolt formations unless the odds are overwhelming. The Luftwaffe's tactical doctrine, built on the promise that lightness means survival, now faces a machine that rewrites the rules. For every P-47 lost, several return home battered, but intact, their pilots alive to fly again. The message is clear. Brute force, when engineered with purpose, is its own kind of weapon. The Thunderbolt's firepower and armor do not just win dogfights, they break the will to fight at all. By the end of 1943, Luftwaffe squadron leaders faced a new reality. Operational bulletins, once filled with tactics for aggressive interception, now included warnings about specific American fighters. Jagdgeschwader memos circulated through the ranks, quoting higher command: when encountering Thunderbolts, break off the attack if possible. The directive was blunt: avoid unnecessary losses to these heavy fighters. Pilots who had once measured their skill by how close they could cut a turn now received instructions to disengage if a P-47 entered the fight. Instructors read aloud from the latest orders during morning briefings. The message was clear: do not pursue Thunderbolts in the vertical. Do not attempt to follow them into a dive. If a P-47 appears above your flight or rolls in behind, prioritize survival over engagement. The official language left little room for interpretation. 1U-27 bulletin from December quoted: when Thunderbolts are present, break contact and regroup. Losses are not to be risked against this type. Squadron leaders, many with years of combat experience, enforced the new rules with resignation. The pride of the Jagdflieger, built on decades of offensive doctrine, gave way to institutional caution. This shift was not just tactical, it was an admission that the Luftwaffe's best could no longer guarantee dominance in the air. The order to evade was a quiet acknowledgement, written into the daily operations of every Western Front squadron, that the old equations, lighter, faster, deadlier, no longer applied. For pilots like Meyer, who had built careers on seeking the fight, the new directive set the boundaries for every mission that followed. March 2nd, 1944, Egon Meyer, credited with 102 aerial victories, and the Luftwaffe's leading anti-bomber tactician, takes off from Courmayeur in his FW-190A6. His squadron climbs west, tasked with intercepting a daylight raid bound for Frankfurt. The sky over Montmedy is thick with contrails. American bombers, their P-47 escorts weaving high above. Meyer, separated from his wingmen, spots Thunderbolts from the 365th Fighter Group circling for altitude. He banks hard, searching for a gap, but the Americans have the sun and the height. Lieutenant Walter Gresham of the 358th Fighter Squadron rolls into a steep dive. He closes to 400 yards before firing. Gun camera footage freezes the moment. .50 caliber rounds tear through the FW-190's nose and cockpit. Meyer's aircraft snaps into a vertical roll, trailing smoke, then plunges straight down. Impact is immediate. Wreckage scattered on the edge of a muddy French field. The Luftwaffe's leading Western Front ace is gone in seconds. On the ground, local farmers mark the crash site. American pilots radio confirmation. Meyer's final tally, 102 kills, 26 of them four-engine bombers, ends here, not in a duel of skill, but in a sudden, overwhelming strike from above. The Thunderbolts climb away, their engines fading into cloud. For Jagdgeschwader 2, the loss is more than tactical. In debriefings that night, silence hangs heavy. No one speaks of heroics. The ace who taught others to attack head-on, to trust in doctrine and nerve, has fallen to the weight and speed of American engineering. Within days, the news spreads. Even the best, especially the best, can be caught and finished by the new rules of the air war. By 1944, German command had issued directives ordering pilots to avoid areas where P-47 Thunderbolts were sighted, a clear admission of the psychological and tactical impact documented throughout this film. Engineering records confirm the P-47's 7-ton mass, 2,000 horsepower R2800 engine, and 8.50 caliber machine guns, outmatching the 3-ton Bf-109 in both survivability and firepower. Captured German pilots repeatedly described the Thunderbolt as a flying tank, citing its ability to absorb damage and outdive pursuers. Yet, some Luftwaffe debriefings remain sealed, leaving unanswered questions about the full extent of these encounters. Today, historians and engineers still study the P-47 as proof that brute force design can redefine air combat psychology. The evidence is clear. American engineering not only challenged the Luftwaffe's doctrine of agility, it forced a complete tactical rethink. The P-47's legacy stands as a documented turning point where scale and power shattered the myth that bigger meant weaker in the skies over Europe.